Okay, today we're talking about tithing, and okay, I'm gonna say it like it is, and then you can give me Jesus's words. Times are tough out there for a whole lot of people. You know, it used to be, hey, you could separate those who are doing well off, and they're very clear. You're very clear, and then you got those who aren't doing so well. But now, with the cost of living, it's like it's everywhere. There's pressure on families financially to be able to commit to their church. So tithing is a big thing.
It is a big thing, and my opinion on this is going to be relatively controversial in some
Good.
circles.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
But it does come from a full-blown study of Scripture and not being able to come out in any opinion other than the one that I hold to. And others might be able to give me a different opinion, and that's all good. My understanding is that tithing was a tax for the people of ancient Israel, essentially a tax. It funded the Levites and the religious system, but they were also the political system. It did a number of things. It funded the religious system, it helped feed the poor and those who were struggling, and it provided for a party that would happen every few years as well. So it had a lot of functions, and then there were other taxes that were kind of put on top of that. And when different kings came in, they put on different taxes and the burden increased for people. But tithing was essentially a tax. You get to the New Testament and you see Jesus challenging the Pharisees on their tithing. You tithe on this little bit of what you have, on this little bit of what you have, but you ignore the greater issue of justice, which is partly what tithing was about. Also recognizing that tithing was an acknowledgement that everything that we have is a gift from God. So the people were called to give back out of that gift that they're giving. When you get the extension beyond the Gospels of the gospel into non-Jewish cultures, into Gentile cultures, tithing never gets mentioned. But generosity and giving are mentioned all the time. So I would argue that based on that, tithing, as it appears in Scripture, is not mandated for the New Testament church. But generosity and giving are. Now, if we look at the nature of the generosity and giving going on in the church in the New Testament, and particularly what Paul encourages, where there is need, we give to meet that need. So where there is one church that was struggling, he would be encouraging other churches to meet the need of that church so that when they're struggling, the same can go in reverse. So there's an expectation, there seems to be written into Paul, that the struggling don't give. The struggling are the ones who are given to. And then when you're doing well in life, you're expected to give as well. So in my church, for instance, I don't talk about tithing. I tell my people that as a church, we have expenses. And if you consider this your church, we would hope that you would meet those expenses. But more importantly, we try and keep those expenses as low as we possibly can so that we can meet each other's actual needs. So when a church member has an issue or they have an expense that they can't meet, my expectation is that others in the church would help give to that. Or if we see people in our community where we can give, we want finances freed up so that our people can give to that.
Oh, you've definitely ruffled some feathers and spirits on people this morning. Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I've read through some of the scriptures about where the ideas of tithing and stuff come from and the 10%, but there's stuff in there that, people take and hold on to and are like, they continue doing that and cool, that's their choice, right? But then there's other things that I'm like, man, this would be great to continue on, where they put aside money to basically have a party every few years to celebrate extravagantly and really that was a principle of theirs was to let loose and prepare to let loose.
Where it gets muddy is in the idea of tax. So we all pay tax. Some of that tax that goes to the government, whether we like it or not, some of that tax fulfills what the tithe was doing in the Old Testament. So there are principles there. So some people might hear me going, nobody has to give, you don't have to tithe, don't worry about giving to your church, don't worry about giving. I'm the exact opposite of that. I think everything we have is from God, and everything needs to be given back as if it's from God. All of our money, all of our finance, all of our time, all of our talents, it's all God's. So it's all a question of how do we give back out of that. Now, tithing, whilst I don't believe it's mandated for the church, when people have said, how do I start a habit of giving? I've said 10%
Yep.
could be a really good way to get started, just as a recognition that this is all from God, so give some back. But if you are struggling and that is going to throw you into debt, or it's going to mean that you're giving your kids less food on the table than what they need, then I would say pull that back and let's start talking about how the church can give to you.
Yeah, interesting. I once heard someone say a 10% tithe is a tax on the poor and an excuse for the rich.
Wow, that's brutal.
It was pretty brutal, but it makes you think about things, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's the tricky thing is we're trying to translate something that has an ancient context for an entire nation, not just a small community of church people. We're trying to translate that into a modern context where it just doesn't translate over in the same way, but the principles of it do. God has given, so we give back. We fund the church that we are a part of, just like they did with the Levites, and we look out for the poor.
Yep. I struggled with tithing for a long time. And it wasn't just, was just when I started going to this new church that I'm going at the moment 4 years ago, that I appreciated where the money actually goes into the church. It goes actually to help the poor. And so I really like the words that you're using there, the narrative about everything belongs to God. Everything that we have is from God. So isn't it in our best interest? And don't we have a responsibility to give back to God? So that's how I changed the narrative on that to make me accept that, hey, it doesn't belong to you in the first place.
Yeah, and then I would challenge our churches to be mindful of our expenses and where that money is going. And then if you've got pressure around buildings and you're asking for people for money because you're feeling the pressure of your building as opposed to meeting the needs of people, then I think we need to question some of those assets.
And you can email Frank Ritchie.